My name is Aurora Stratton. I'm 31 years old, and on the night I got married, my mother tried to give away my future in front of 100 witnesses and expected me to smile about it. The band was easing us out of our first dance when it happened. The violins faded into something softer, something less cinematic and more human. Glasses clinked in uneven rhythms. Somewhere near the champagne fountain, somebody's aunt laughed too loudly. The string lights overhead blurred into halos, turning the reception hall into a place that looked like magic if you didn't know where to look for the cracks. Garrett's hand was still warm in mine. My dress still smelled faintly of hairspray and vanilla. My cheeks hurt from smiling. That's the kind of night it was. So perfectly curated that you almost believed it. Almost. In my family, perfect has always been a warning sign. My mother floated through the crowd like she owned the room, which, in a way, she did. She had the smile on, the one I grew up studying like a survival manual. Warm, radiant, memorized. A charity gala smile, a church lobby smile. The kind of smile that says we are good people so convincingly that no one dares look at the smoke coming from the next room. She closed the distance between us in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 that erased the last traces of buttercream from our cake. Garrett squeezed my hand once and then let it go, giving me space to greet her, to play the part. "Aurora," she cooed, and that alone was a bad omen. She only uses my full name when she's about to move something in my life without asking. My father drifted closer at the same time, like gravity pulling him into her orbit. Behind them, my younger sister Cassie stood in her bridesmaid dress, crystals catching the light, like they were winking at a joke only she understood. Mom didn't waste time. "We're passing along the Honda your husband's parents bought you," she said, voice honey smooth. "To your sister." For a second, I thought I misheard. The music, the murmurs, the clatter of cutlery, it all kept going. But the sentence landed in my chest like a stone dropped in deep water. Behind her, Cassie tilted her head in that practiced way of hers. "Relax, Rory," she said, using the nickname that always sounded like it came with an eye roll. "It's just a car." I didn't look at her. I looked at my mother's teeth, white even, perfectly aligned, like pearls on a string pulled too tight. Just a car. Garrett's parents had handed us that "just a car" the night before at the rehearsal dinner. A 2019 Honda Accord. Not flashy, not ostentatious, but brand new, solid, ours. They'd given me the title with both hands, like it was more than paper. "You two are building something together," Garrett's father had said, voice thick with emotion. "Here's something to help you move forward." The title was in my name. It wasn't about the medal or the mileage. It was about trust. A quiet, unwavering, "we believe in you" from people who barely knew me, but saw me more clearly than my own parents ever had. Maybe that was the real problem. I knew the pattern long before the car ever entered the picture. When we were kids, Cassie got the bigger bedroom. I got the explanation. "She's younger, sweetie," Mom had said. "She needs more space to grow." When Cassie spilled nail polish remover on my desk and blistered the varnish right off, Mom didn't get mad at her. "You should have kept your schoolwork in your room," she told me instead. "You know how your sister is." Cassie borrowed my sweaters, stretched them out, sometimes returned them with stains I never identified. I got lectures about sharing and being the bigger person. Cassie totaled her first car at 16. The rain was blamed. The road, the universe. I worked 3 Black Fridays and 2 Christmas Eve shifts at Target to buy my first used car at 19. The universe did not get blamed when I was exhausted. I was called responsible. The lesson was clear. Cassie got the benefits. I got the character development. By 31, resilient felt less like a compliment and more like a tool they kept sharpening on me. Garrett's hand brushed my elbow. Just a tap, a question mark. I answered without looking at him. My fingers found my clutch and the thin envelope inside. Paper shouldn't have weight, but this did. This envelope had gravity. "You're giving away our wedding gift," I said. Not loud, not dramatic, just a sentence that wanted to exist. Mom's smile didn't crack. It thinned. "Don't make this into a thing, Aurora," she replied, voice dipped in practiced disappointment. "It's just a car. Cassie has had such terrible luck with transportation. You and Garrett can manage with one vehicle for now." Manage. Like she was reorganizing the linen closet and found a better place for something I clearly wasn't using properly. Cassie laughed softly, like this was all lighthearted. "It's honestly safer with me anyway," she added. "My Civic is literally falling apart." She said it as though the universe owed her an upgrade. and I was just the easiest delivery system. I could feel eyes turning toward us. Not everybody, not yet. Just the people closest. People who'd known me my whole life and would still swear they'd never seen anything like this coming. My father finally spoke, the way he always does, late and half-hearted. "This isn't a big deal," he said, but his eyes were already on the envelope in my hand, like some part of him knew. My thumb traced the sealed edge. Last week, sitting at our dining table surrounded by wedding favors and seating charts, Garrett had said, "Your family has a pattern with you. Do you want to go into this blind again?" "No," I'd answered, surprising myself with how quickly it came. So we didn't. "Your card was empty," I heard myself say now. Mom's eyebrows twitched. "We took it as a symbolic gesture," I continued. "This isn't." A faint ripple went through the circle around us, like someone had dropped a whisper into the punch bowl. Cassie's lips parted in delighted outrage. "Wow," she said, half laughing. "You really think you're tough now, don't you?" Somewhere near the cake table, a phone lifted, almost by instinct. Garrett didn't move, but I felt him steady himself near me, as if bracing for a wave already in motion. "We told her earlier," Mom said brightly to no one in particular, as if she were narrating for an invisible audience. "She's just overreacting. We thought this would be more practical with Cassie. Family helps family." That's what they always said. Family helps family, right before taking something out of my hands. I slid the envelope out of my clutch. "Then this is practical too," I said. Dad reached for it automatically, curiosity pulling him in. Mom snatched it first, fingers grazing mine, cold and firm. Cassie leaned in over her shoulder. They opened it together, like it might contain a check big enough to forgive any insult. It wasn't a check. "It's a notarized declaration," I said, my voice dropping into that strange, calm place I only find right before everything changes. "Executed 2 weeks ago. It states that all wedding gifts, including the vehicle titled in my name, cannot be sold, gifted, or transferred without my written, notarized consent." Mom's eyes sped down the page. Cassie's smirk evaporated somewhere near paragraph 2. "Any attempt to reassign ownership," I went on, "triggers an automatic legal review and restricts any future inheritance arrangements from Garrett's family." That got their attention. Of course it did. The music didn't stop. It sagged. The band played on, but the room's focus shifted to us like someone had turned a spotlight. "You can't be serious," Cassie said, panic thinning her voice. "You're threatening us at your own wedding? Over a car?" I met her eyes for the first time. "You made a public claim," I said. "I'm setting a public boundary." Dad let out a dry laugh with nothing inside it. "This is petty, Aurora, completely over the top. It's a car, not a child." "No," I replied. "It's a principle. It's every principle you only applied to me when Cassie wanted something I had." Mom folded the paper and slid it back into the envelope like it had dirtied her hands. "We are family," she hissed softly. "You do not treat family like criminals." "You went into our garage last night," I said, my words quiet but sharp. "You took photos of the car and posted them online." Cassie blinked, slow and guilty. "It was a joke," she said weakly. "Symbolic." "Symbolic of what?" Garrett asked, his first words in all of this. His tone was calm, almost gentle, but it cut through the noise. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't the night my life fell apart. It was the night it finally stopped pretending. There's a particular kind of silence that only shows up at weddings. Not the empty silence of an abandoned room, but the heavy kind that presses itself over music and laughter, flattening everything into stillness. That silence arrived now, smoothing itself over the reception like a sheet of ice. I could feel people watching without turning my head. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Even the band seemed to be playing more quietly, as if the song itself was eavesdropping. Cassie found her footing first. She always did. "It's honestly safer with me anyway," she repeated, louder now, for the benefit of the crowd. "My car is barely hanging on. It's not like you even need it that much." What she meant was, "You don't need what I want as badly as I do, so hand it over." It was the same unspoken rule that had governed our entire childhood. Garrett stood a half step behind me, a calm, solid presence. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to take over. He just stood there, present, witness. Mom shifted her weight, turning slightly so her profile faced the nearest table, the way she always did when she wanted people to see her best angle. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Aurora," she said, tightening her grip on the envelope. "We thought this would be more practical. Cassie's car is dangerous. You and Garrett can manage with one vehicle for a while. You don't need to make a scene." There it was, the accusation wrapped in concern, the insinuation that my refusal to be stepped on quietly was the real problem. I didn't make a scene, I replied. You made an announcement. A soft gasp fluttered through the nearest table. My father's jaw flexed. Aurora, that's enough. Enough. That word had covered so many of their choices. That's enough questions. That's enough talking back. That's enough of you wanting fairness. For the first time in my life, I felt the clean, electric snap of no in my spine and didn't swallow it. I took a breath that tasted like broken glass and turned slightly toward the crowd instead of away from it. For the record, I said clearly, the car Garrett's parents gifted us is titled in my name. It's a wedding present. To me. To us. Not a family asset to redistribute. Mom's smile flickered, just for a moment. She hated being contradicted in public more than anything else. Don't drag other people into this, she hissed. This is family business. Family business. That phrase had covered theft, lies, and every unfair decision they'd ever called a lesson in generosity. Behind her, Cassie's eyes were bright, almost feverish. You're really going to stand here and argue about a car on your wedding day? She scoffed. Wow. Married 5 minutes and already acting like a dictator. I didn't respond to her, not yet. Instead, I looked at my mother. You said you told me earlier, I said quietly. You didn't. You decided, and you expected me to nod and say thank you. Mom opened her mouth, probably to insist she had told me, and I'd just misunderstood, but I didn't give her the chance. There are some scripts you know by heart. You don't need to hear them again to know how they end. Give me the envelope, I said. Her fingers tightened. From behind me, Garrett's voice came, low and steady. Diane, he said, using her first name. It would be best if Aurora holds her own legal documents. For a fraction of a second, she looked at him like he'd committed treason. Then she let go. I took the envelope back and slid the document out, holding it where they could all see without snatching. The embossed notary seal glinted under the string lights. This isn't a threat, I said, my voice level enough to carry. This is clarity. This document states that all wedding gifts, especially the car, cannot be transferred, sold, or promised to anyone else without my written, notarized consent. Any attempt to do so automatically triggers legal review and affects future financial arrangements with Garrett's family. A ripple moved through the room, bigger this time. People who'd been pretending not to watch stopped pretending. You can't be serious, Cassie said, her voice pitching higher. You're seriously lawyering up over this? At your own wedding? You tried to reassign a gift that wasn't yours to touch, I answered. At my own wedding. Dad swore under his breath. Something about dramatics. Mom's voice dropped to a serrated whisper. You are humiliating us. No, I said. I'm just refusing to be humiliated quietly. Cassie laughed high and brittle. You've always been like this, she said, projecting for the gathered audience. Self-righteous. Acting like a martyr because you didn't get the bigger room or the latest phone or whatever ancient grievance you're still storing in that brain. I turned to face her fully. You got the bigger room, I said calmly. You got the gifted car first. You got out of consequences every time you broke something of mine. I got explanations. I got lectures about being the strong one. I got told that family helps family, by which you all meant I helped you. Her mouth twisted. So what? You want a refund on childhood now? Somewhere behind us, a phone camera flashed. Of course, someone was recording. Families like mine love an audience almost as much as they hate accountability. You went into our garage last night, I said, my tone almost conversational. You took photos of the car and posted them on Instagram with the caption, "Finally got a ride that fits my lifestyle." Cassie froze, the color drained from her face, then returned in an angrier shade. How did you... Security footage, Garrett said, stepping in just enough to be heard. We got an alert around midnight. Also, your post had a geotag. A murmur rose from the guests, sharper this time. My mother's head snapped toward Cassie. You posted... It was a joke, Cassie sputtered. It was symbolic. I was just manifesting. People do that all the time. Symbolic of what? I asked. Of you claiming something that doesn't belong to you yet, as usual? My father's expression hardened. All of you, stop, he said. This is ridiculous. We are not airing family drama in front of everyone. I almost laughed. You did that when you announced you were giving away my wedding gift, I said. I'm just correcting the record. Mom's voice sharpened. Put that paper away, Aurora. You are not threatening your own family with lawyers. It's not a threat, I repeated. It's documentation. I slid the notarized declaration back into the envelope and tucked it into my clutch. Then I reached into it again and pulled out a second envelope, this one smaller, thicker, with Cassie's name printed on the front in my handwriting. Her eyes widened. "What is that?" she asked. My mother reached for it automatically, but I took a half step back, making the boundary visible. "This one is for Cassie," I said. "And before you panic, no, it is not a lawsuit. It's just clarity." I turned slightly and held it out. My father, perhaps out of habit, extended his hand to take it before Cassie could. "Fine. Let him be the courier." "You can read it later," I said evenly, "in private. It outlines specific instances of you using my property without permission. Dates, amounts, screenshots, and how I expect things to work going forward." Dad looked at me like I'd just started speaking an unfamiliar language. "You kept records?" he asked, stunned. "You taught me to be responsible," I answered. "I took it seriously." For a moment, nobody spoke. The band kept playing, a soft, uncertain melody. The lights kept glowing. The buffet line kept existing in the background like a painting, but in the center of the room, something invisible had shifted. Cassie swallowed hard. "You're actually doing this," she whispered, "over a car." I shook my head. "This isn't about a car," I said. "It's about everything that was ever mine somehow becoming negotiable. It's about the bedroom, the sweaters, the money, the favors, the emergencies that were always my problem to solve. The car is just the first time I had paperwork ready." My mother's eyes were glassy with fury and something that almost looked like fear. "We raised you to be kind," she said, "to be generous, to be giving." "You raised me to give," I corrected quietly. "And you raised Cassie to take. There's a difference." For the first time in my life, she didn't have a comeback ready. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she kept reaching for a script that wasn't there. Behind me, Garrett's fingers found mine and threaded through, solid and steady. "Dance," he said softly, speaking not to me, but to the band. The drummer lifted his sticks. The singer looked over with a question in her eyes. I nodded once. The music rose, fuller now, cutting across the tension. Conversations resumed in low tones, but the center of gravity in the room had moved. It wasn't with my mother anymore. It wasn't with Cassie. It was somewhere between the envelopes and the empty space I'd carved out for myself. Garrett and I stepped onto the dance floor again. As we passed my father, I pressed the envelope with Cassie's name more firmly into his hand. "Help isn't theft," I said quietly, "and love isn't unlimited access." We turned away before anyone could answer. We danced. Not to entertain guests, not to give the photographer more material, but to claim the floor as ours, to move in a room where, for the first time, I wasn't shrinking to make other people more comfortable. At the edge of my vision, I saw my mother standing rigid by the cake table, working desperately to reconstruct a socially acceptable smile. Cassie stood beside her, eyes blazing, crystals on her dress no longer sparkling so much as glaring. The envelopes stayed where I'd left them, one in my clutch, one in my father's hand. Truth has a way of sitting in a room, even when everyone pretends not to see it. The morning after my wedding felt like waking up in someone else's life. Not a better one, not a worse one. Just different. The quiet had weight. It hovered in the corners of our kitchen, settled on the stairs, breathed against the windows. A kind of silence that watches you, waiting to see what you'll do now that the dust has stopped pretending to float. My dress hung over the bedroom chair like a ghost too tired to haunt anything. My bouquet had wilted into a shapeless slump. Garrett moved around the kitchen, making coffee with the kind of purposeful gentleness people use around shell-shocked survivors. I sat at the table in my robe, scrolling through my phone, knowing I shouldn't look. But curiosity is stubborn. The first post hit like static in my chest. Cassie Harper. Some people care more about money than family. Hope it's worth it. 53 likes. A few comments. A row of heart emojis. And then the one that made my stomach twist, not with pain, but with recognition. Mom. Letting go is painful, but sometimes necessary. Still praying for those who forget where they came from. I stared at the screen until it dimmed on its own. "Don't," Garrett said softly from behind me. "Don't read it again." "I'm not," I lied. He slid a mug of coffee toward me. The steam curled between us like a warning. "She's trying to rewrite the story before it sets," he said. "Your family always does that." He was right. In my family, the version of the story told first became the truth everyone else had to orbit. Reality wasn't a matter of facts. It was a matter of presentation. Whoever crafted the narrative got to claim victimhood, and everyone else had to negotiate their guilt around that. I took a sip of coffee, bitter and grounding. We knew this might happen, Garrett added. You prepared. Better than they expected. I know, I said. It's just strange to watch them twist so fast. He kissed the top of my head. When people lose access, they panic. Before I could answer, another notification pinged on my phone. Then another. Then 3 in quick succession. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, I whispered. I opened the first one. A GoFundMe link. Title: Vehicle Emergency, caused by family betrayal. Goal: $8,000. Organizer: Cassie Harper. The description was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive victimhood. My sister blindsided me at her wedding. I was promised reliable transportation and had it taken from me without warning. Now I have no way to get to work. I'm devastated and just trying to rebuild my life after this shocking cruelty. There were already 2 donors, $8 total. But one name stood out: Karma. $10. I snorted. Garrett came around to look over my shoulder. Oh my God, he said, laughing. Karma literally donated. Aurora, you cannot make this up. I took a screenshot because honestly, how could I not? Then I closed the app and tossed my phone onto the table as if distance alone could stop the absurdity. She'll take it down once she realizes people aren't buying the act, Garrett said. Oh, she'll double down first, I said. She always does. He smirked. Then she'll rewrite the rewrite. I nodded. That was the Cassie cycle. Dramatize, accuse, play victim, retreat, reboot the story. We'd planned to leave for our honeymoon that morning. Nothing extravagant. Just a slow drive up the Pacific Coast Highway in the same Honda, our Honda, a symbolic reclamation. No timetable, no reservations. Just miles of road and the ocean breathing beside us. I packed in silence, folding clothes into the suitcase with methodical precision. Garrett handled the snacks and chargers with more enthusiasm than the task demanded. When we finally stepped into the garage and I slid into the driver's seat, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. We drove. Not fast, not slow, just forward. Past city limits, into wide stretches of highway where fog kissed the rim of the cliffs and the sun slipped in and out of clouds like a bashful performer. The world felt big in a way I hadn't noticed in years. At a rest stop, leaning against the car, I caught my reflection in the window. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, eyes tired but alive, brighter than I remembered seeing them. You look peaceful, Garrett said beside me. I let the words settle. I feel unhooked, I admitted, like I'm finally breathing air that isn't filtered through someone else's expectations. He smiled. Boundaries do that. We stood like that for a while, quiet, steady, letting the wind rearrange our thoughts, until my phone buzzed again. Mom. A long text. You're still angry. This has gone too far. Family helps family. That's how we raised you, Aurora. Call me when you're ready to apologize. Apologize, of course. A year ago, that message would have crushed me, would have pulled me into an apologetic spiral, desperate to mend the narrative. Now it just felt familiar, predictable, tired. I stared at the text for a long minute. Then I scrolled through my photos, found the picture of my notarized declaration, and sent it. Caption: Help isn't theft. Then I blocked her number, not in anger, but in self-preservation, like placing a lock on a door that had been swinging open for decades. We kept driving, tracing jagged lines along the coast, the ocean turning gold in the late afternoon light. Every mile felt lighter. Every breath felt truer. That night, sitting beside a lake with our feet in cold water, Garrett leaned his head against my shoulder. You okay? He asked. I considered the question. I'm more than okay, I said slowly. I'm finally done. He nodded. Good, because something in his tone told me he knew what I would soon learn for myself. Done is not a moment, it's a practice. And the real storm hadn't even reached us yet. Coming home after the honeymoon felt like stepping into a house that finally belonged to us. Not because anything had changed physically, but because I had. The walls didn't hum with guilt anymore. The floors didn't creak with expectation. The air felt lighter, sharper, like someone had opened windows inside my chest. But the silence was strange. Not painful, not empty, just unfamiliar. For the first time in my life, nobody expected anything from me. No casual dropping by, no requests disguised as emergencies, no guilt messages, no subtle reminders of what I owed them. It was freedom and withdrawal. My phone stayed quiet. The family group chat, normally buzzing with daily updates, memes, and logistical nonsense, had turned into a digital tomb. Not a single message since the wedding. I waited for the ache to hit, for the loneliness, for the guilt to drown me. Instead, all I felt was space. Garrett noticed before I did. The morning after we returned, I sat at the kitchen table staring at a cold mug of coffee until he gently nudged my foot under the table. "You've been looking at that cup for 10 minutes, he said softly. "What's going on in your head?" I blinked. "Oh, just decompressing, I guess." He tilted his head. "Decompressing or detoxing?" That word landed in my chest like a key fitting into a lock. I didn't answer. He didn't push. Therapy was Garrett's idea, offered without pressure, just an open hand. I took it, because if I didn't learn how to exist without the role I'd been assigned since childhood, the strong one, the giver, the responsible co-survivor, I was going to drown in the new quiet. My therapist, a calm woman with kind eyes and annoyingly accurate intuition, listened to me explain the entire wedding confrontation in a single breathless monologue. When I finished, she asked one question. "How do you feel about all of it, not how they feel?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because I didn't know. I tried again. "I think I'm grieving them." She nodded. "That makes sense." "Except," I said slowly, surprising myself, "I'm not sad." Her pen paused. "Tell me more about that." I took a breath. "I think I'm detoxing from them, not grieving them. Does that make sense? I miss the predictability, the routine, the role, not them." She smiled gently. Detoxing is a powerful word, and a truthful one. Once I admitted it, everything else fell into place. The next day, Garrett came home with a small bag of tools and a quiet smile. "Ready?" he asked. I didn't need to ask what he meant. We changed every lock in the house. Old keys clattered into the trash like broken bones. New smart locks clicked into place, each one a small rebellion. For the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving a door open just in case a family emergency demanded my attention. I wasn't maintaining emotional or physical access for people who had repeatedly shown me they didn't value the gift. Then came the phone. I scrolled through my emergency contacts. Mom, Dad, Cassie, all listed as people to notify in case of catastrophe. Every name felt like a relic from a life I no longer lived. One by one, I deleted them. For emergencies, I put Garrett, my therapist, my best friend from college, people who showed up without cost. Next were the photos on the fridge. Posed smiles from holidays that never felt as happy as they looked. Fake harmony frozen in time. I peeled them off one by one. Then I chose one photo to leave. The candid shot from the wedding, captured seconds after the confrontation. Mom mid-frown. Cassie stunned. My envelope visible in my hand. Garrett beside me, calm and steady as an anchor. It wasn't a pretty photo, but it was honest, my favorite kind. A truth snapshot. Proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. Proof that, for once, I chose myself in a room that demanded I shrink. The guilt came in waves. Small ones, then bigger, then small again. An aunt texted, "Your mother is devastated. You should be ashamed." A cousin messaged, "She's your mom. Don't you think it's time to forgive?" Forgive, that word again. I replied only once to the cousin. Forgiveness isn't owed. Respect is. 3 dots appeared, then vanished, and never returned. Good. Evenings with Garrett became quiet rituals, porch lights, gentle music, shared blankets, our legs touching without words. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. One night he found me staring at the fading sky, my mind miles away. "Regretting it?" he asked carefully. I shook my head. "No, not regretting." A pause. "Just noticing the quiet." He nodded. "It's weird at first." "It's not the silence that's weird," I said. "It's the absence of noise I mistook for love." He squeezed my hand. "Then this isn't silence," he said. "It's peace." I let that idea settle inside me like a warm stone. Peace. I hadn't realized how loud my life had been until it wasn't. A week later, I got a missed call from my dad. No voicemail, just a number blinking like a ghost. I stared at it until the screen went dark. Then I set the phone down. I didn't call back. Answering would have been stepping back into the role they knew, the role I'd outgrown. The next day, I found an envelope slipped under our front door. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Inside was a photo from childhood, me and Cassie sitting on the porch, arms around each other, sunburned and smiling. On the back, in my mother's immaculate script, "Don't let anger erase your memories." My throat tightened for a moment, an old reflex. Then I exhaled. Even her nostalgia was a weapon. A soft plea disguised as a sweet memory. A guilt hook wrapped in sentiment. I tore the photo in half. Not out of rage, out of reclamation. I didn't need to erase the past. I just refused to let it rewrite itself. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen windows. I made breakfast, toast, eggs, hot coffee, without flinching at shadows that weren't there. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt mine. Boundaries don't end battles. They expose them. I learned that slowly, in the weeks after we got home, like watching a tide pull back and reveal the sharp edges of rocks you didn't know were there. At first, everything was silent, too silent, like the moment right before a storm decides what kind of destruction it wants to be. Then the messages began. The first came from my aunt, the one who always delivered family gossip with a saccharine smile. Aunt Marlene. "Hey, sweetie, just checking in. How's married life?" I stared at the text, innocent, friendly. A toe dipped into the pool of my resolve. I replied politely. "We're doing well. Settling in. Hope you're okay too." She waited exactly 12 minutes. Aunt Marlene. "You know, your mother is heartbroken, right? She says you won't even speak to her. Maybe you could reach out, just to ease the tension?" There it was, the pivot, the real message under the small talk. I typed and deleted 3 different replies. Finally, I'm not responsible for managing her feelings. She made choices. So did I. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. She never replied. Good. Next came a cousin, Lila. "I heard about the wedding. That sounds intense. But she's still your mom, Aurora. Don't you think it's time to forgive?" Forgive, a word my family used like a leash. I answered simply. Forgiveness isn't owed, respect is. She didn't reply either. Another relative, someone I hadn't spoken to in months, sent a passive-aggressive Christian quote about laying burdens down. Someone else sent a voice note that began with, "I'm saying this with love, but..." I deleted it without listening. Every message carried the same subtext. Return to the role, restore the old script, undo the boundary. I refused, and the more I refused, the quieter they became. Meanwhile, life with Garrett grew softer, steadier. Like the fog had finally lifted from the corners of my mind. We built new rituals without meaning to. Friday night, takeout eaten on the couch with our feet tangled. Sunday morning drives just to feel the ocean breathe beside us. Playing instrumental music while reading different books, but sharing a blanket. Laughing in low whispers even when no one else was home. Quiet was no longer something that watched me. It was something that held me. Sometimes, in the middle of these quiet moments, I'd feel a strange tightening in my chest, a phantom guilt that whispered, "You're abandoning them." But then the next whisper came, softer but truer. "They abandoned you first. You're just noticing now." One evening, I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in oranges and bruised purples. Garrett brought me a cup of tea and sat beside me, our shoulders brushing lightly. "You're quiet," he said. I hesitated. "I don't miss them," I admitted, "but I miss the predictability." He nodded. "Of being needed?" I tilted my head. "Of being controlled," I said slowly. "Of knowing exactly what version of myself I had to be, to keep the peace." It was exhausting, but it was familiar. He took my hand. "Familiar isn't the same as good," I breathed out, something inside me loosened. He added, "You don't owe anyone the smaller version of yourself just because it makes them more comfortable." The words hit deep, like they'd been waiting years to be said. We sat in silence until the sky faded. It was one of the most peaceful moments of my life. Then the test came. A missed call from my father. No voicemail, no follow-up text, just his number lingering on my screen like a ghost tapping the window. Old Aurora would have called back instantly, even when she knew the lecture was waiting on the other end. But I didn't call. I set the phone down, turned it face down, let the moment pass. That single action felt heavier than the legal envelope I'd wielded at the wedding. It didn't collapse me, it steadied me. 2 days later, I found an envelope shoved under our front door. No postage, no return address, just my name written in the cursive I had memorized from years of birthday cards and fridge notes. My mother's handwriting. Inside was a photo from childhood. Me and Cassie sitting on the porch, arms wrapped around each other, knees scraped, cheeks sunburned, smiling like we believed in the world. On the back, in her perfect script, "Don't let anger erase your memories." Mom. For a second, just a second, something inside me trembled. The memory of that day flashed bright, popsicles melting too fast, the dog barking, Cassie tugging my braid and laughing. It would have been so easy to let that nostalgia pull me back into the old shape of myself, the shape that bent, the shape that said, "You're right, Mom, I'm sorry." But then I saw the manipulation underneath the sweetness. It wasn't a plea for connection, it was a plea for compliance. A reminder. Look at what you're giving up. Look at how cruel you're being. Memories aren't weapons, unless someone decides to use them that way. I tore the photo in half. Not violently, not theatrically, just decisively. I dropped both halves into the trash. I didn't need to erase the past. I just refused to let it be rewritten. The next morning, sunlight spilled across our kitchen table. I brewed coffee. Garrett hummed something tuneless as he walked past me. The house was quiet. But for the first time, the quiet didn't feel like a test. It felt like a choice I'd made, over and over, until it finally felt natural. A full year passed before the story tried to pull me back in. 12 months since the wedding. 12 months since the confrontation. 12 months of silence where there once had been constant noise. And in that silence, something inside me reshaped itself. Our house, our life, became a place with no hidden corners, no waiting for the next emotional ambush, no guilt hovering like humidity. Every room felt lived in. Every evening felt earned. Every morning felt like a small, unspoken victory. People think healing is loud. It isn't. Healing is the quiet that stays. Our first anniversary came softly, like something that didn't want to make a fuss. No grand plans, no tropical island, no attempt to outshine the wedding. Just us and the car, the same Honda that my family tried to steal from our lives, the spark that lit the truth. Now it was the vehicle that carried us into peace. We packed light. Just snacks, jackets, playlists with no lyrics, and a map dotted with nowhere specific stops. Then we followed the Pacific coast until the air tasted like salt and the horizon stretched open like a promise. As the sun dropped toward the ocean, we parked near a cliff. The sky looked painted, lavender bleeding into gold, streaks of pink brushed thin as breath. Garrett leaned against the hood, hands in his pockets, wind ruffling his hair. "Remember when you said you'd never dance again after the wedding?" he asked. I laughed. The memory felt ancient. "Yeah," I said. "Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things." He lifted a brow. "Like what?" "Like thinking I needed them to feel complete." He smiled, slow, certain, soft. "You were complete the day you said no, Aurora. Everything after was just cleanup." I looked out at the water, waves crashing against the rocks in blunt honesty. No performance, no manipulation, just truth. He was right. The moment I said no, the moment I refused to shrink, that was the first time I met myself fully. We stayed there until the sun melted into the ocean and the headlights softened the dusk. Then we drove home with the windows cracked, letting the coastal wind slip its cold fingers through our hair. It felt symbolic, not a return, a continuation. A life rebuilt where the old one ended. When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed something sticking out of the mailbox, a cream-colored envelope with gold edging. My stomach didn't twist, it didn't drop, it simply settled. Because I knew. Garrett knew too. He stayed beside me, not shielding me, not urging me, just present. I opened it under the porch light. Inside was a card written in my mother's precise, elegant script. "We miss you. We love you. Come back when you're ready to be part of this family again." I stared at the words for a long moment. Not because they hurt, but because they didn't. A year ago, this card would have cracked something inside me, would have made me question myself, would have spiraled me into guilt and longing and obligation. But now I could see every seam. It wasn't an olive branch, it was an invitation, not to reconnect, but to regress, to return to the role they understood, to fit back into the shape that made sense to them, to make myself small enough to fit into their definition of family. Garrett said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was the opposite of theirs, supportive, grounding, honest. I tore the card in half. The sound wasn't dramatic, it wasn't angry. It was quiet, almost polite. Then I dropped the pieces into the trash can on the porch, brushed my hands together lightly, and inhaled the night air. People think closure comes from reconciliation, from hugs and apologies and tearful reunions. But they're wrong. Closure comes from refusal. Refusing to step back into the rooms where you once had to disappear. Refusing to play the part that kept you small. Refusing to confuse conditional love with actual care. Closure isn't a door swinging open. It's a lock clicking shut from the inside. Garrett wrapped his arm around my waist. "You okay?" he asked. I leaned into him, feeling the quiet settle around us like warmth. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm finally home." He kissed my temple. "Good," he murmured, "because you're not going back." I looked at the torn card, the scattered halves glinting under the porch light, and felt something inside me seal with soft finality. "I'm not," I said. And for the first time, the quiet wasn't something I entered. It was something I owned.